All right, everyone, welcome into episode 199, one away from a special number here on the Two Countries, Two Americas All Sports Podcast. I'm Nick Olive, as always, from Chattanooga, Tennessee, the United States, and joining me from, I believe, Nokomis, Florida, is Gus Tomazzelli. Gus, how are we doing here on this Monday evening, September 22nd, 2025?
Doing good, doing good. Yeah, and you brought up a great point. Yeah, this week's kind of special week. We're gonna have two episodes this week to celebrate the 200th episode. We're gonna do a special one on Thursday. I'm gonna do live from the Braves minor league stadium. Yeah, and also I wanted to do it here in the United States, the special episode. So that's why we're doing the one this Monday night and another one on Thursday. We're going to divide, since we have so many things to talk about this, we're going to divide into two categories. Tonight, we're going to focus more on college football and NASCAR. And on Thursday, on the American side, we're going to definitely focus on the NFL and Libertadores. And tonight, also Brazilian championship. But yeah, and yesterday was quite a bit of experience. I'm going to talk more on Thursday at the Jets Tampa Bay Buccaneers game.
Yeah, and I do want to acknowledge right now the Monday night game is going on. It's in the third quarter, very competitive. The Lions just tied up the Ravens 21-21. So we'll keep an eye on that. And of course, talk more about that on Thursday. We'll talk more about the NFL. But let's get into some college football talk. Because we are now through 4 weeks of college football. We're already through almost a third of the season, Gus. It sucks how quickly college football goes. Now, every single week is its own storyline. And I think for this week, the biggest storylines are the teams and the programs that have fallen off a cliff. And Clemson, perhaps, has fallen off a bigger cliff than any other program that we have seen in some time. This was a program 10 years ago that was at the peak of college football, competing for national championships, went toe-to-toe with Nick Saban's Alabama, beat them 2 times in 3 years with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. However, these days, the Clemson Tigers can barely win a football game. They've lost 5 of their last 10, including beginning 1-3 at the beginning of this season. They lost at home to Syracuse 33-21, the same Syracuse team that Tennessee beat pretty handily in week 1 back in Atlanta. Yes, it's mind-boggling just how much of a disaster the Clemson Tigers truly are. This is pretty nuts. And shout out to Jason Warwick, our friend in the comments, saying 200 episodes. Wow. And, of course, LMAO, because obviously Jason is a big Clemson hater. He does not like Clemson, and I don't like Clemson either. So this is quite a funny
it's a common rival for us on the Two Countries, Two Americas All Sports Podcast. And yeah, you definitely brought up a great point, Nick, I think. And this season exposing not only Dabo Swinney, but also Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. Another quite embarrassing loss against Tulsa. And those two had those. It's so funny. Both of them challenged the Alabama dynasty. Clemson way more than Oklahoma State. But, Mike Gundy was that controversial 2011, choice by the BCS to put Alabama and not Oklahoma State. And definitely Clemson that throughout the mid-2000s and 10s, was the biggest challenger to the Alabama dynasty. And it feels like Clemson more than Oklahoma State because, the expectations, there is way more. The program is more established, and Dabo Swinney definitely built a program. And everybody thought he was going to be when Nick Saban eventually retired, he would have, take the position as the Alabama head football coach, and that ended up not happening, and I feel like Bama got the best coach available in Kellen DeBoer. But yeah, I think it's all about adapting. Yeah, this is the end of definitely those two programs have to realize that as much as success and wins those two coaches brought, it's time to cut the cord and say we need to, move on and find a new identity, because definitely Clemson, Oklahoma State, they're just disappointment after disappointment.
Yeah, and looking at Clemson specifically, I think the thing that stands out to me when you look at this is that when I think back to the Tennessee-Syracuse game, Tennessee ran the ball at will in that game. I believe we had over 250 yards rushing. Clemson this game ended up with 140 yards rushing. However, Cade Klubnik threw 60 passes in this game. Clemson should be good enough to be able to run as much as you want on a team like Syracuse, right? And they just didn't here. And Klubnik had 363 yards and 3 touchdowns, but he did that on 60 passes. That isn't exactly efficient in the slightest, especially when you look at what a guy like Jonte Cook did, 6 catches, 113 yards. I mean, Jonte Cook, I'm telling you, like, that is a guy that he is probably going to be in the NFL one day. He is a solid wide receiver for Syracuse. Really played well against Tennessee, played well in this game. And you have to commend Fran Brown, too, because he talked about this during the week last week, where he's like, like, it's like having a girlfriend, like having a wife. Dudes are coming after her, complimenting her, and like you realize it's part of the game, but like you're not going to let people walk in and take your players. And Fran Brown stood on business here, and he's built a very solid program, right? Like he upset Miami at the end of last year. Of course, got this big one at Clemson. He's off to a very good start up there in Syracuse, and there's a reason why I was low-key kind of nervous heading into that Syracuse game in week 1, because I respect Fran Brown a lot as a coach. I think he's built a really good program up there, and Clemson found that out the hard way. And the difference between Clemson and Syracuse is, well, Syracuse uses the transfer portal, and Clemson does not use the transfer portal. I think 3 of their players are from the portal, which, hey, it's 3 more than Clemson used to, but Dabo has to realize that his way of coaching college football is over. And he is not going to ever get back to the levels that he was at. I've also seen some people say that, frankly, was it him that built Clemson, or was it Brent Venables that built Clemson with his defenses? And since Venables has left Clemson, that program has not been the same. And now we look at Oklahoma finally putting it together under Venables, and they have an absolutely nasty defense out there in Norman. So, I think that is a argument. But also, I mean, outside of when you had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, 2 generational quarterbacks for Clemson, what else has Dabo really done outside of that, right? Like, I mean, they've won several ACC titles. They've won, yeah.
And I think you brought up 2 quarterbacks. They made a difference in the program. Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, and it's so hard to hit back to back. Only Oklahoma and then Alabama had that ability to have 2 consecutive elite quarterbacks that brought success to the program. But then everybody thought, I remember, DJ Ugalele is going to take over, and he never accomplished. And now Klubnik also didn't accomplish. So,
Right.
like, Dabo.
Go ahead. I'll finish that thought.
No, I was going to say, like, Dabo wasn't the great quarterback developer that everybody thought he could.
Yeah. I do want to circle back to Clemson here in a minute, but I do have some comments here on TikTok I want to get to real quick. Shout out to your one Jaw, who's asking for our thoughts on Michigan and Underwood. So I'll just kind of give my quick thoughts there. I'm not really impressed with Bryce Underwood. I mean, he's only a few games in as a true freshman, so you got to give him time to grow. However, I am getting some serious flashbacks to how Nico did last year for Tennessee. Nico Imlava did last year for Tennessee and Bryce Underwood. Now, hopefully, Bryce Underwood has better advisors around him, is more patient because he could definitely grow around him. But I think the thing that really makes things different between Underwood, that makes things even more similar between Bryce Underwood and Nico is the fact that you have an amazing running back behind Underwood and Justice Haynes. Justice Haynes is the center of the Michigan offense. So, and Justice Haynes, frankly, may have a chance to be a Heisman finalist by the end of the season. So I think Michigan, their obviously their defense, ground and pound. Although I will say, I don't think their defense has been great this year. Like, I wasn't particularly impressed with them this past week. And I don't think they were necessarily, great 2 weeks ago at Oklahoma, but Michigan also has a really easy schedule. So, they have a great shot of being 9-2, 10-1, heading into that Ohio State game at the end of the season, where everything could literally be on the line. And if you're 10-1, that means you're undefeated in the Big Ten. Michigan doesn't have to play Oregon. They don't have to play Penn State. They don't even have to play Indiana, or even, I believe, Illinois. So, because this Nebraska game was one of their hardest games. Because coming up, you've got Wisconsin in 2 weeks. That's an easy win. You got at USC. So, that will be an interesting game. Washington home is an interesting game. But then you have Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland. They should roll in all those games. So there's a very, very good chance that at worst they're 9-2 heading to Ohio State. If you're at least 9-2 with Ohio State coming to town, then you have a chance at the playoffs and probably the Big Ten championship. So, Bryce Underwood, though, is going to have to get a lot better for Michigan to win that game again. However, the thing that Michigan has is you have the mental aspect over Ohio State. And also, too, this game with Nebraska as well, you had the mental aspect as well because Nebraska just cannot get out of their own way. I don't know when they're going to win one of these big games again, Gus. Like, they have lost 29 straight games to ranked opponents.
Yeah. And we talked about coaches that, kind of, are outdated. Everybody, I feel like the environment of the college football world wants Nebraska to be good. Wants Nebraska to be relevant because all the history in the 80s and the 90s. But they didn't find the formula yet. They try to hire a very prestigious and historical alumni that was a good quarterback in the past and had some track at UCF, didn't work, and now they have a coach that had also a solid track down in Texas, but it feels like it's not working as people expect it to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a program problem at this point. An absolute program problem. And for Nebraska, and the Dylan Raiola thing, too. And Raiola didn't, play bad in this game. But the problem for him is that the whole thing with him imitating Patrick Mahomes is very it's distracting when you don't win.
Yeah.
It's distracting when you do win. But, get your own play style. Get your own personality. And yeah, I'm just he's throwing little underhand passes down 10. I'm just like, bro, what are you doing? Just throw a normal pass, keep it moving. You're more worried about being Patrick Mahomes than winning.
Yeah, I mean, impersonation is good when things are going great. Then it's a silly segment on Sports Center. At this point, this kind of becomes a distraction for a program that has not reached a success level.
Right. And Dylan Raiola is the best quarterback Nebraska's had in a while. It's just that whole deal just makes no sense. So thank you for the comment. Your one, Ja, with Michigan getting to 3-1, Nebraska falling to 3-1. I also have a comment from Johnny Daytona. He's asking a fantasy question. He asked, he got Trey Benson and Quentin Johnston for Chase Brown and Rashid Shaheed. What do you think? I love that trade for you because Trey Benson now is RB1 for the Arizona Cardinals. Quentin Johnston's off to a really solid start. And I think he's emerging as the biggest deep field threat for the Chargers. And Chase Brown, his stocks are way down because of what happened to Joe Burrow. And Shaheed, like, yeah, he's the WR1 on the Saints, well, him or Olave. But the problem is they've got Spencer Rattler playing quarterback for them. So I think that you are in a good spot there for sure. All right, but so those are some of the comments there. Thank you so much. So let's circle back around to Clemson because we were talking about their quarterback situation. We have looks like a third screen coming up here.
No, that was me. I was fixing here. It's just tonight a lot of technical issues.
Absolutely, but we are working.
Yeah, we're working through it.
Yeah. The back on Clemson though, you're right. How DJ Ujalele, like when his run didn't work at Clemson, that kind of signaled the beginning of the end. It's almost like when they lost to Georgia in 2021, the beginning of the season, they're 10-3. They kind of took the soul from them. Like that combined with the 49-21 shellacking they took from Ohio State in that Sugar Bowl back at the end of the 2020 season.
Yeah, that's true. That whole combination, and it's so funny how, like for comparing to another fellow ACC, Florida State, they went on they went up very solid way to pretty much be this close to making the college football national the college football playoffs. Year later, they ended up falling off a cliff, and now they're climbing back, and they're undefeated right now. They're number 8 in the country, and Clemson, they're kind of being stagnated. They're not bad, but they're not good.
Exactly, and they're an average program at this point, and you're not going to win by just recruiting high school talent. And Clemson doesn't exactly recruit the best high school talent. So, I mean, they recruit very good out of high school, but they're not great. And they're definitely not great enough to win when you don't go to the portal.
As the Lions are on the lead.
Yep, Jahmyr Gibbs with the touchdown there. Grew up 30 minutes away from me down in Dalton, Georgia. So shout out to the local kid here, Jahmyr Gibbs. But, yeah, Clemson, just disaster. And for them, right, like, when you look at the rest of the season, I mean, how many wins are they going to get this year? Because clearly the thing about them is they're 0-2 in the ACC. So they're probably not going to make the playoffs.
No, yeah. For me, I think it's done, their chances.
Yeah, because unless you're able to win out and somehow sneak your way into the conference championship game, but which I just don't think is going to happen at this point. Because they still got their next game is 2 weeks at UNC, which means that's going to be just a crap show game. You have struggling Clemson going into a UNC team that just got blown out by Central Florida. Talk about
you saw the memes that people are saying that Clemson and UNC are going to be put on the Cartoon Network at 10 a.m.
He's pretty much, yeah. Yeah, Bill Belichick versus Dabo Swinney. Combined 8 championships, but like they don't know what they're doing. They're both old and geriatric for 2025 college football.
And speaking of ACC, how big? I mean, Jordan Hudson at this point, how Bill Belichick has to tell her to at least keep the distractions off the game, because I mean, she's becoming too much of a distraction at this point.
100%. Like the whole thing is just silly, especially when you don't win. And it's not that you're just winning, but in the 2 games against solid opponents, I mean, North Carolina has been completely blown out. Just an absolute nightmare for North Carolina. And Gio Lopez is horrible. Gio Lopez is one of the worst transfer quarterbacks I've ever seen. I mean, that guy cannot complete a pass. Remember in week 1 when he went 2 hours without completing a pass? Just awful.
Yeah, I think. I mean, Bill Belichick at this point, probably North Carolina are gonna stick because they are like it's really hard in college football, you fire the coach in year one. You tend to at least give 2 years for developing a program.
Yeah. But at the same time, like, how long is Bill Belichick going to want to do this? I don't think he's going to want to do it for very long.
Yeah.
Yeah. In any case, yeah, for Clemson, though, very bad. I mean, we mentioned Oklahoma State earlier, losing to Tulsa 19-12 Friday night. Yeah, they're going to have to get rid of Mike Gundy. I mean, they're going to have to. I mean, like Dabo, Gundy is not embracing the transfer portal, and unlike Clemson, Oklahoma State is not recruiting at a high level. Like, they have one of the worst rosters now in the entire Power Four. I think this was a team once upon a time, right, as you mentioned, that competed for national championships, that competed for Big 12 championships, and they're just awful. They have not won a Power Four game now in over a calendar year. And there's a very good chance they're not going to win another Power Four game this year. So, and you hate to see a legend go out like this, but for Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy, just absolutely terrible.
Yeah, yeah. And in both situations, it's really hard to move on because, especially for Clemson, like you tend to, you don't want to, get rid of the mess, one of the masterminds that brought this program success, but you eventually have to move on.
100%. And I don't know where Oklahoma State goes, but you got to get someone who's going to get some energy. And I just don't quite know how good Oklahoma State can really be, given that they're the redheaded stepchild in a small state like Oklahoma, because your big brother's in the SEC, and you're kind of already behind on your NIL infrastructure, and you're in a small town like Stillwater. I just don't know really how Oklahoma State recovers from that. Now, a program that I expect to recover with the right coach is Florida. But man, just this season has turned. We knew that they had a tough schedule, but I think losing to South Florida just completely derailed their entire season. Of course, they lost to Miami again, 26-7. They had 32 yards of offense in the first half of this game. DJ Lagway, I mean, he might be the worst quarterback in the entire SEC. I mean, 5 interceptions at LSU and then that performance. I mean, this is horrible. I mean, honestly, like I saw a report today that he's in a walking boot now. So you may see Harrison Bailey trot out for the Florida Gators next week against Texas.
Really?
Yeah.
Harrison Bailey.
Yeah, the Harrison Bailey.
I guess with the COVID year and everything, it's possible, but he was a freshman in 2020, right?
It was a freshman during the 2019 season, a true freshman.
Wow.
Because I remember during the Gator Bowl being like, can we please put in Harrison Bailey? And so I don't have to watch Jared Garantano play anymore.
Wow, how time fly by.
Yeah, man. God, we were stuck with some bad quarterbacks, man. Man, I don't miss Heard days one bit.
No.
But, yeah, but I mean, Billy Napier, I mean, it's only a matter of time. I'm shocked they haven't pulled the trigger now. Maybe they're going to give him a chance to upset Texas at home. And Texas is certainly not unbeatable. You know, their offense has not been very impressive. I know they scored 55 against Sam Houston. And, Gus, did you see the situation with Arch Manning where
why people making big deal that he was staring at the player in the floor? What's up with that?
Well, my problem with it, and I don't normally have a problem with it, but you're doing it against a small team like Sam Houston State. When we saw you a few weeks ago crap your pants on live TV when you go to Ohio State, and the only big game that you've played so far, and then you're going to come back and like try to like flex on an 0-4 CUSA team when you're Texas. You're supposed to be Texas, right? You know, horns down, all that. But you know, it's just like what are we doing here? You know, like it makes Texas once again look insecure. And then that's the thing about Texas. They are a very insecure program. And if their offense does not continue to advance, like I think they'll beat Florida in 2 weeks, but they got to go to Georgia this year, you know, and that's a big road game that they have. So we'll see what Texas can do.
But in terms of the Florida Gators, I told a couple of weeks ago that Billy Napier is like Butch Jones 2017. They're just waiting for the right situation, and I still calling they're gonna fire Billy Napier after the Georgia game.
I think that would make sense. Yeah, but yeah, Florida, they're probably gonna lose like 8 games this year. Just a complete disaster for Florida. And what sucks is their defense is playing really well for Florida. But you got to wonder if the defense is going to give up at some point and they're going to just start getting boat raced. Hopefully, one of those games is Tennessee. So, in any case, all right. Some of the other big games, which our game of the week last week was Oklahoma Auburn. Jackson Arnold's return to Norman. And Arnold had a rough one. He was sacked 10 times in this game. Just part of it, obviously, the offensive line got completely overwhelmed by Auburn, by Oklahoma's defensive line. I mean, R. Mason Thomas, that dude's probably the best pass rusher in the SEC this year. But I was part of it's doing on Arnold, like he holds the ball too long. And he played tough, but there's a reason why Oklahoma ditched him to go to John Mateer. And Oklahoma won the game because of that decision that they made. So 24-17. And this was a controversial one, too, because the SEC admitted that they missed an infraction on a touchdown in the second quarter by Oklahoma, where they were faking some guy. They were faking a player being subbed off, but they kept the guy on the field and he was able to sneak up the sideline for a touchdown. So a bad miss for the SEC officials. And sure, I'm glad at least they're issuing statements post-game, but I think these officials need to be doing press conferences.
I mean, it's worldwide, I think, at this point, because this argument they just made, Nick, that I heard here in Brazil, too, that officials, the referees here, need to do a press conference after the games to explain decisions, and especially with this video era where all the leagues, NFL, soccer in Brazil and Europe, NBA, MLB, all they have video reviews. Everybody is not, because in the past, everybody was like, oh, the referee made a mistake, but, he only had his 2 eyes, and, sometimes you ended up not having the right angle or the right point of view. But now with video technology, it's really hard to miss something like that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what makes these misses really bad. But you have to feel like, they got to put more mechanisms in there for these decisions to get reversed just like that. We have the video immediately. And it feels like we hamstring the ability to use video evidence to fix obvious errors. And ultimately, but I will say this, though, this is not the reason why Auburn lost this game. Auburn lost this game because they gave up 10 sacks. That's where they lost this game. And plus, Jackson Arnold's just not a good quarterback. And I think, Auburn, if they don't pull off some big wins this year, I think Hugh Freeze probably will get fired. If they don't pull off some big wins. And I think Auburn can, and I think they will pull off some big wins somewhere. They just have too much talent in this team not to. But Jackson Arnold will have to play well enough for them to do so.
Yeah. I think Hugh Freeze definitely is in a situation that he needs to have some big game wins. And that 3-game stretch is going to be a hard one. Texas A&M, Georgia, and Missouri, all ranked, and they're all on a rise.
Yeah, I think personally he probably needs to upset one of Georgia or Alabama, and he gets them both in Auburn this year. And we all know how weird typically the Iron Bowl is in Auburn. A whole bunch of weird stuff tends to happen in that game. So I think Auburn can pull off one of those two, but I think they need to. Otherwise, I think he gets fired.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a coach that needs to show some results.
Yeah. Also, I think the result I think that just shocked me. Freaking Indiana winning 63-10 over Illinois. I think we picked Illinois to win this game, if I'm not mistaken. And not only did they lose, they lost by 53, guys. Like freaking Fernando Mendoza looked amazing in this game for
And,
the Hoosiers.
and also the Illinois defense being so praised that they shut out. They had a shutout the week before. I guess Indiana just shows that they're they're gonna remain in the top of the Big Ten.
Yeah, like Kurt Zignetti, like he made a statement here because clearly it's to me it's like I think a lot of people kind of just assume that last year was a fluke for Indiana. It was a weak schedule. You know, you kind of got lucky with all the transfers from James Madison. Um, you know, Fernando Mendoza, is probably not going to be as good as Curtis Rourke, but he's better. And this team is just very physical. Like they're very well coached. I mean, they had over 300 yards rushing in this game. Like Indiana is a very, very good team. And like when you look at their schedule, right? Can they make the playoffs again? You know, they have some huge games coming up. Like they got to go to Iowa this week. We all know they have a really good defense, not a good offense. They've got to go to Oregon in a few weeks. Can Indiana compete with Oregon in Eugene? Remember, they went to Ohio State and Notre Dame last year. They couldn't compete in either one of those stadiums. This Indiana team might be better this year. They might be able to hang in a stadium like that, you know? But then you get past that, right? You got Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland. I mean, they'll be favoring all those games. Then you've got at Penn State. So, I mean, you're undefeated right now. Can you upset Oregon or Penn State on the road?
Those are the games they're going to show if Indiana are just going to be a viable Big Ten team that is going to sneak into the playoffs like they did last year and be a quick elimination, or they're for real.
Yeah, and that's the next step for Indiana. You got to prove you can actually beat a big boy. But otherwise, the path sets up for them to go 10-2. So.
Yeah, it's a very viable path, in terms of that, because the only big opponents are Oregon and Penn State, and it's so funny with this era of expanded playoff. If they ended up losing, Indiana lose those two games, there's an argument they can sneak into the playoffs because they lost to two top 10 teams.
Yeah. And for Illinois, I mean, this is just a devastating loss. Like, it derails their entire season. Not just losing this game, but losing by 53. That was a loss they couldn't take. And I'm stunned. Like, they went into Duke a few weeks ago and beat them by, like, 26. Like, I thought Illinois was a much better team than that. So, for Brett Bielema, like, that's a hard one to swallow for the Fighting Illini. Yeah. So some other quick reactions here. Missouri had a pretty big one, 29-20 over South Carolina. The Gamecocks now are 2-2. And I kind of said preseason, I thought they could make the playoffs. That's not going to happen because unfortunately South Carolina is just not as good around Lenore Sellers as I thought they would be. And Sellers was good in this game, but South Carolina, do you know how many yards rushing South Carolina had in this game against Missouri?
95.
-9.
Wow.
So they can't run the ball. Lenore Sellers, he's a big dude. He can run the ball. He had -28 yards rushing in this game. That's not a recipe for success if you're South Carolina. And Carolina will probably be struggling to make a bowl game. 6-7 wins. And considering they were a preseason top 10 team with playoff aspirations, I mean, this is a disaster for South Carolina, for Shane Beamer. And obviously with the Virginia Tech job open now, I'm sure those rumors are going to be flying whether or not Beamer will be linked to going back to his father's school. So this could turn out to be a really disastrous season for South Carolina potentially. And think about this, South Carolina and Clemson, that game preseason looked like that was going to be a very significant game with playoff implications. And now the game is really just going to be for bragging rights. I guess it's not going to have any playoff implications, probably.
Yeah, I guess they're going to be the salvation game where the winner is going to be, oh, we beat our rival, and the loser then definitely is going to really. And it feels like South Carolina has a more bigger chance to win and just seal the deal on the end of an era for Dabo Sweeney.
Yeah, because that would be 3 out of 4 for South Carolina if they were able to beat Clemson this year. Also, Memphis. How about the Memphis Tigers beating Arkansas? They were down 18 in this game, came back to win by a point. Arkansas fumbled the game away on the goal line. This feels like that's the end for Sam Pittman.
Yeah, I think Sam Pittman, again, was a very charismatic coach that unfortunately had hit his ceiling last year. Of course, that win over Tennessee kind of kept him in the job. But at this point, I think Arkansas was too stagnated, kind of like Nebraska, but for longer.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you look at Arkansas, right, like that's a job that I think a lot of good coaches are going to want because there's a lot of NIL money there with Walmart and some of the other companies in Northwest Arkansas. Like there's resources there for Arkansas to compete. Sam Pittman's just not putting it together though for the Razorbacks. So, and definitely losing to Memphis is not getting it done. However, for Memphis, this now puts them firmly in that conversation for the G5 playoff spot. Between them and South Florida and the American, you got UNLV, who's undefeated right now in the Mountain West. You still have Tulane, who I think is going to be a player in the American, although Tulane got blown up by Ole Miss, so they're not going to have the P5 win. However, you have a free horse race in the American Conference between Memphis, South Florida, and Tulane. And Memphis and South Florida each have big wins over SEC teams. So you would think that either one of them have the heads up there. And for UNLV, they do have a win over UCLA, but UCLA is winless and not good. So UNLV is probably going to have to hope for some chaos to happen with some of these American teams for them to be elevated back up. Because remember, Boise State's already taken a loss this year. So even if UNLV beats Boise this year, that one's not as impressive as it would have been last year.
Yeah, I think the G5 spot is pretty much open. As you point out perfectly, the Memphis Tigers with that win over Arkansas kind of be like a front runner, but Tulane and UNLV are on a run. But yeah, I don't see a. I don't see a Boise State coming back. I think it's gonna be a new face in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, shout out Texas Tech as well, getting a big win on the road at Utah, 34-10. I mean, those investments they made, especially on defense, paid off in this game. Like Texas Tech actually having a defense is wild to see. Because Texas Tech never has a good defense, Gus. But they do this year.
I mean, the Big 12 is known for being a more pro offense than defense.
Yeah, right now I would say Texas Tech is probably my favorite to win the Big 12 and make the playoffs. And of course, I picked them preseason to win the title, and I feel very good about that prediction.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, I feel like, it's going to be a very competitive. I'll say, I mean, there's a lot to happen into December.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so let's get into some of these games next week. Here,
But,
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say before that, I know that the one game that we forgot is our beloved Tennessee Volunteers.
Right. Well, I was going to bring that up when we got to Mississippi. So bring that up here all kind of in one go.
Oh, okay.
In a minute. Okay, so let's talk about first underrated games for this week. I've got two, Gus. I mentioned this 11 Indiana going to Iowa. I want to see how Indiana handles this kind of tricky spot. Iowa has a really good defense. We know their offense doesn't do much of anything. Can Iowa find any offense at all to maybe try to spur an upset here? I mean, that's kind of the
Yeah, because the Hawkeyes tend to be tricky opponent, especially for a team like Indiana.
yeah. So that's a hard game for the Hoosiers, especially coming off of a big win. So Indiana has certainly would prove a lot to me by winning there. Also, Auburn at number 9, Texas A&M as well. Jason Wyrick says Indiana is PVU. He's not sold on Indiana. So, and there's definitely, I think, facts to the fact that that Illinois was certainly way overhyped, but still, them winning by 53, that to me indicates Indiana's a lot better than I thought they were. Are they good enough to make the playoffs? That remains to be seen. Probably not. But I mean, Indiana, they're a good team. I don't know if they're a great team, but I think they're a good team. The other I mentioned the other underrated game is Auburn at number 9, Texas A&M. Of course, huge one here for Huge one here for Mike Elko, right? Like A&M is off to a very good start this season. You don't want to lose a game like this because Texas A&M has like Texas coming up at the end of the season. They've got some tough games that they have to play. You can't take a loss to a team like Auburn if you want to make the playoffs. And of course, remember, it's a revenge game as well for Texas A&M. Remember, their season kind of got derailed towards the end of the year last year when they lost this game. Making sure guys can hear me here.
No, I was switching. My computer is back. Can you hear me?
Yes. You are back online.
Yeah. I'm back online, and because I was missing showing the comments and everything. But in terms of this game, definitely Texas A&M has another opportunity like they did last season to be like, to get to the Texas Longhorns game, with a viable chance to make the playoffs and even, get to the SEC championship. And definitely those games are the trickiest ones against Auburn that had as we just point out, a decent performance against Oklahoma.
Yeah. Guess what underrated games do you see for this week?
I see one in the ACC. Georgia Tech, number 16, going to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, take Wake Forest. Because, Georgia Tech right now is a front runner in the ACC. They're undefeated in the conference, beating Clemson. So, and also Notre Dame going to Arkansas. Notre Dame at this point, they have to show at least something because, they got a win last week against Purdue, but they're only ranked out of the pettiness of the committee because, they kept it number 22 despite having 2 losses already.
Right, and their defense isn't good. Like their defense has fallen off a cliff this year. So, I think this is going to be a very tough game for Notre Dame. I wouldn't be shocked if Arkansas pulled off the upset in that game because it's going to be high scoring both ways. What's it? The over-under is 64.5. I'm going to bet the over in this game. I think both teams get into the 30s easily, if not the 40s.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, and I think, for Sam Pittman, this can be a life jacket, something that will keep his job alive.
Exactly. And as we all know, going to Fayetteville is very, very important, very hard. We call it Vietnam for a reason. So, and Tennessee can't win there for whatever reason. But guys, for my upset pick of the week, also another underrated game too. TCU going to Arizona State. Of course, Arizona State is still unranked after their one loss at the last second against Mississippi State, which I feel like is a little unfair. Like I think Arizona State is still probably a top 25 team. And they have a chance to prove it this week if they can upset the undefeated TCU Horned Frogs, who are just coming off defeating SMU this past week. Can we also talk about how like SMU for a playoff team is just off the map this year? Again, like they made the playoffs over Alabama, and now they already have 2 losses to begin the season this year. Now, granted, both of those losses are to Big 12 teams in Baylor and TCU, so SMU theoretically could still win out, go to the ACC championship game, but I don't think they're better than Miami or Florida State.
No, yeah, I think the momentum from last season is pretty much gone.
Yeah. All right, but my upset pick of the week, Gus, Virginia over 8th Florida State, and here's why.
Ooh.
So it's a Friday night game. Those are always hard, always tricky for a team. When you have a short week, you're traveling up to Virginia. Virginia is a good team, too. Like, they're much improved. And next week is a night game at home against Miami for Florida State. Florida State has every reason in the world to look forward to Miami and completely skip over Virginia. Don't be shocked if the Cavaliers pull this off.
Yeah, I mean, and also they want something to show. I mean, beating the number 8 team in the country in Charlottesville, it's gonna be massive for the Cavaliers. Especially they're kind of on the after so kind of consecutive bad seasons, they're kind of on a comeback. Being 3-1, it's gonna be the first ACC game for Florida State. So it's a tricky challenge.
Right, because Florida State really hasn't done anything significant since beating Alabama. They had 2 cupcakes. So let's see what Florida State's got here on the road at Virginia on Friday. Now, our Tennessee Volunteers, they boat raced UAB on Saturday, 56-24. I was in attendance. Good to be back in Neyland for the first time since 2023. And I'll say this. The offense was fast, fun, and real again to see in person. Joey Aguilar is a surgical operator of the Josh Heupel offense. It felt like I was watching Hendon Hooker in 2022, at least in terms of the pure speed and pace of the offense. I'm not saying Aguilar is as good as Hendon, but he definitely operates with the same speed. He operates that offense faster than Joe Milton or Nico Emiliovic. So, and I've seen all those quarterbacks play in person. So this was a lot of fun to see. Now, a couple of things here. One, the secondary still isn't playing very well. We gave up 400 yards passing in this game to Jalen Kitna for UAB. Granted, a lot of those yards came to 4th and 5th stringers, but, this defense clearly has taken a clear step back this year, and a lot of that's due to injury. And until we get Jamar McCoy and Ricky Gibson back, like our secondary is just going to struggle, which is kind of scary given some of the teams that we play coming up. And I think we're going to have to probably win some shootouts. There's just no other way about it. Like Georgia ended up being a shootout, and we ended up losing that because we couldn't hit the field goal at the end. Also, UAB as well. I'll just have to say this, and I have actually one of my coworker friends. He is a UAB alum, and he was texting me about the game, just how much he doesn't like Trent Dilfer for UAB. And you see where like he was texting right before the start of the game, and he was taking pictures of the stadium like he was a tourist or something, and not like the head coach of a team. And then like the guy tried to like injure Max Gilbert's foot on the extra point.
Very, very unsportsmanlike attitude.
Right. It's a poorly ran football program. I think they'll have a new coach. Jason,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jason says, Joey has been a pleasant surprise. He settled into the offense quite nicely. He's not missed a ton of downfield throws. He is improving, and Josh Heupel is working his magic. So
I think one characteristic that feels like similar between Hooker and Aguilar, both of them were more connected to Josh Heupel and ended up being a more connected piece. or even more like they both wanted to fit in more into the program. I think it just shows that Hypo definitely is going to try to find quarterbacks at transfer portals, not trying to kind of recruit, I feel like.
Well, I mean, ultimately, we're going to have to develop our own quarterbacks, right? Because, I mean, Hendon, right? Like, he kind of he kind of brought in from the portal. Well, actually, Pruitt had brought in Hendon from the portal. And of course, he brought in Joe Milton from the portal, and Hendon turned out to be the better quarterback of the two. Now, I mean, Joe Milton, I mean, wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. And of course, we all know what happened with the Nico saga. So there could be a point there to where, like, we just might be in a transfer portal era. Now, we'll see if Asian Brandon or George McIntyre changes this at all moving forward. I'll say this. I wasn't too impressed with Jake Merklinger on Saturday. I thought he missed several of the throws. Now, he didn't have some bigger throws later in the game, but, you know, I don't know. I really wanted to see George McIntyre play. We didn't get to see him there in the second half for the Volunteers. However, this week, also, I just want to say this one thing. I love some of the upgrades Neyland has made. Like the concourse on the south end of the stadium, very nice. It's much, much improved. Now, you can still tell where parts of the stadium have not been upgraded. They're still like kind of old and dingy, which means Neyland, right? Like it's an old stadium. But parts of the stadium are much more modern than they used to be. So it's definitely coming together. And I know.
Also, how was getting into the stadium, because there were several complaints in the Georgia game and the game before that about fans getting to the stadium was some issues with access.
Oh, it was very straightforward and very simple. Like, surprisingly, it was simple. So yeah, it was a like.
So I guess
It was about 5 minutes.
So I guess they pretty much ended up fixing that, because I saw some reports in the Georgia game and the game before that, fans were taking longer to get into the stadium.
100%. Definitely, it was a very smooth experience. And for us, anytime you have 100,000 people in the same place, right? It's not going to be the most comfortable experience in the world. But for Josh Heupel or for Benny White, like the staff's doing pretty good, and they're continuing to make the experience better. So Jason, he also said that Heupel has done a great job streamlining the offense to mask Aguilar's inconsistencies. That's a sign of a great coach and a coachable quarterback, which I completely agree with. Now, the thing that, as far as great as Josh Heupel has been, one of his big thorns, outside of not being Georgia, has been road games. So road games under Heupel haven't been great, right? Like, you look back, and it really goes back to 2022. We beat LSU on the road, have that massive win, and then, you actually lose to Georgia, which means, okay, Georgia was the best team in the country this year, in that particular year. But then we all know what happened in South Carolina in 2022. Now, I do think there was some outside help there, but a loss is still a loss. 2023, the debacle at Florida and Missouri that year, and Alabama. Like 3 or 4 losses were on the road in 2023. And then last year, both of your regular season, all 3 of your losses actually were on the road, because you lose to Arkansas, a game you shouldn't have lost. You lost to Georgia again. And then, of course, you went to Ohio State and lost. But then again, Ohio State was the best team in the country in the postseason. So 2 of those losses I can forget. The Arkansas one was bad. But there are truly, there are 3 unforgivable losses, right? The 2022 South Carolina loss was bad. Cost us a playoff spot. 2023 Florida, like, we were the better team that year. There was no reason to lose to Florida in that game. And then Arkansas last year. So you have 3 straight years where this team has had losses on the road that were frankly unacceptable. Mississippi State would probably fall into that category if Tennessee lost. Now, Mississippi State, to be fair to them, has had a great start to the season. They are 4-0. They had that upset over Arizona State back in week 2. They beat Southern Miss in Hattiesburg. They defeated, I know they just beat Northern Illinois this past week. And they beat Alcorn State. So they're 4-0 right now. And Starkville is going to be absolutely nuts with all the cowbells and stuff. I've kind of thought about maybe putting a cowbell in my room somewhere. That way, so I can just prepare myself for having to listen to that for 3 hours. But, with everything that we know has been a problem for this program, this is perhaps the most critical game of this entire year because you have to win this football game, especially with the fact that the Georgia game ended the way it did. And we don't really have room for error if we want to make the playoffs, right? Like, if you look at the rest of the year, like if you win every game outside of Bama and Oklahoma and split those two, that's 10-2, and that's the playoffs. That gives you no room for error. If you had beaten Georgia, you could drop a game like this, but you can't now. And Blake Shapen and Jeff Levy have clearly found something, and their offense is so much better this year. Definitely night and day difference, which it was shocked to me given everything they lost last year. I didn't expect their offense to improve, but they did. But you do have to wonder how much better is Tennessee than Arizona State. And I do think Tennessee is probably a better team than Arizona State is. Because I do think Tennessee is – I'll say this. Like, I don't think you can name 10 teams better than Tennessee in the country. Like, Tennessee so far through 4 weeks has looked like a top 10 team. And if they're truly a top 10 team, they'll go into Starkville and win this football game.
The only thing I didn't understand was the time slot. Right.
Yeah, I'm glad it's not a night game. Like, I will take that not being a night game.
Yeah.
I'm kind of shocked they didn't make it a night game.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. For the Mississippi State fans' perspective, I would have wanted this game to be a night game. It was an advantage Tennessee.
Yeah. The night game on the SC Network is Kentucky at South Carolina. So I think Tennessee is a much bigger game.
Yeah, it would have been a so much bigger game. I don't understand this choice.
Yeah, because obviously you look at the SEC, right? I mean, you have two ranked games. Those are the two biggest games, and Auburn A&M is really big too. But Tennessee, Mississippi State is probably the fourth biggest game in the conference this week. And it definitely didn't get that time slot.
Yeah, and was a unique time slot. I think is the only game starting at 4:15. I mean, there's Air Force in Hawaii at 4:10, but it's a weird time slot they picked.
Yeah, because those SEC Network games are on those off-kilter games. Because we played at 12:45 against UAB. So, but in any case, the key here is, can our secondary improve? Can they play better? Because Mississippi State has a very good passing game. Blake Shapen is passing at a 67% completion for this year. Bothwell, their running back, is playing at a very high level. Also, the Lions are up by 2 touchdowns against the Ravens under 2 minutes.
Yeah,
it's like they're
dominating the fourth quarter.
Yeah, so for the Ravens now, that's 2 losses in prime time for them. But we'll talk more about that on Thursday.
But back to Tennessee. I mean, for Mississippi State, if they get that win, are they a playoff contender? Because then they would have beat 2 top 15 ranked teams, one of in their own conference. What a turnaround!
Oh, yes. I mean, Miss State, this is a chance, and arguably they should be ranked right now. Arguably, what justification is there for Notre Dame to be in right now over Mississippi State?
None.
Miss State has a win over a playoff team from last year, and they're not ranked. It makes no sense. And Miss State has one of the best wins of the entire season. But once again, it's just that bias.
Yeah. that like the AP poll time and time again is outdated.
Yeah. But I think it's also imperative, and Tennessee's done a really good job of starting off fast this year. Every game, like, I think we've scored at least 17 in every first quarter so far this season. Um, that would be huge to do that again. You got to calm down those cowbells early. Do not let those cowbells overwhelm you throughout this game. And obviously Miss State only has like 50, 60,000 people. But like that, if you give Miss State fans hope, and right now Mississippi State fans have hope, they're going to show up for this game. Um, you know, you're going to have to fight through that. We haven't played on the road yet this year, but I think this team is really, really good, and I think they're going to find a way to get this thing done. And I think they're going to get it done by like a score of 44-31. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. I think Miss State's going to score on us quite a bit just because I just don't trust our secondary right now. But ultimately, I trust our offense to go in there and to get this thing done.
I'm definitely gonna pick Tennessee, but I'm gonna bet the over. I think it's gonna be a 10-point game. It's gonna be Tennessee 31, Mississippi State 21.
It's much lower scoring than I would expect. And so the over under in this game is 61 and a half. So that's like pretty much right at the over under. Well, yours is like the under. I'm going with the over. So in terms of that, Jason's saying that he saw lots of fans unhappy on Twitter after swinging, but it looks like it's improving. That's on the Neyland congestion situation. So yeah, and I think Danny White will continue to improve that situation as well. Okay, so to some of the other big games of the week. Ohio State, number one in the country. We really haven't talked a lot about them since Texas, right? They've played a couple of cupcakes. They're just kind of doing what they do. However, they're finally back in the spotlight this week because they go on the road to Seattle to play Washington in a conference game. Is there any shot the Washington Huskies, who are undefeated so far, and they've kind of rolled through their conference, they just beat Washington State in the Apple Cup, 29-24. And can I also just say this? I feel so bad for Washington State and Oregon State fans. Like, their teams are so bad. Like, Oregon State is winless. They're 0-4. Washington State is 2-2, has been blown out now in 2 straight weeks by North Texas and then Washington. I can only imagine like having your program be demoted like that.
Yeah, and also, what more worst way to be demoted than your rivalry game, big rivalry game, is a week 3. It just show how unimportant they are, because if this game was in the Pac-12 still, and both of them were the same level of relevance, this game would have been in the last week of the regular season, not a week 3.
Yeah. But back on the Huskies, though, I think the Huskies, obviously 2 years ago, they were in the national title game. DeBoer leaves to go to Tuscaloosa. Last year was a bit of a transition year. But I think Jedd Fisch has a squad this year. I think Washington is a sneaky playoff contender. And obviously, if they're going to make the playoffs, they're going to have to pull off an upset like this one. I'm not quite convinced they're ready. I mean, they're 13.5-point underdogs. But I think Ohio State's going to be tested in this game. I really do think this is going to be a big test for Ohio State. But I do think the Buckeyes are going to find a way to get out of this thing with a win.
Oh, yeah. And for Ohio State, I mean, they have, of course, so far the hardest matchup in the country with Texas. And, they came on strong. So now they're gonna, but the game was in Columbus. Now they're gonna have to travel to Seattle. This game reminds me of the Ohio State Purdue game, I think in 2018.
Yeah, and Washington's a lot better than that Purdue team.
Yeah, when Purdue at home beat Ohio State, that was at the time the number 3 team in the country, 49-20.
Mm. Yeah. So who are you taking on this one?
Washington.
Ooh, we got the upset, the Huskies. Which that
Yeah,
would be
that's
a
gonna.
massive, massive win for Washington if they can pull it off. Definitely a welcome
Yeah,
to the big. We are here in the Big Ten moment for Washington. Because you got to remember too, their arch rival Oregon came in and won the whole conference last year. So I know for Washington, they don't want to be upstaged like that. So this would be a huge moment for them.
and the Ravens just scored.
All right, so we're going to have an onside kick here. That's going to make things quite fascinating. You know, Mark Andrews had a great night for the Baltimore Ravens. But in any case, back to picks here. We have number 21 USC traveling number 23 Illinois. This is the big noon game on Fox. You know, Illinois coming off that just a debacle in Bloomington. Can they bounce back against USC, who's undefeated so far?
Yeah, and you put up a great question online. Is this an elimination game? More so for Illinois because they got if they want us to keep a shot in the postseason, they have to win out. But I think UAC is gonna win it, and Lamar Jackson just missed the 2-point conversion.
So it's going to come down here to an onside kick, 38-30 Lions. Honestly, though, I just think it's hard to come back from a loss like that. And I think USC, you know, I kind of called on their downfall in the preseason, but they've kind of played better than I thought they would through this point. Actually, I like USC to win this game and to get to 5-0, despite me being a Lincoln Riley hater.
Yeah, I was gonna say for Lincoln Riley, it's a really important game.
Yes. Because if he gets to 5-0 here, then you start thinking like, okay, what does USC? You know, their next game would be in 2 weeks at home versus Michigan.
Yeah.
So that's a huge one. All right, so the next game on tap, we have the Magnolia Bowl. We have number 4 LSU traveling to Oxford to play number 13 Ole Miss, who currently is starting backup Trinidad Chambliss because their starter Austin Simmons went down. Chambliss so far has put up nearly 800 yards of offense in 2 games for the Rebels. What do we think here between LSU and Ole Miss?
I mean, it's a true test for the LSU Tigers because even though they're undefeated, they don't feel as confident as they should be. You know, Brian Kelly, I mean, we just last week we pulled the clip on the press conference that he was a little bit ticked off by the reporter. So that was the biggest win of the season so far, was beating still at the time ranked Florida. So
well,
now it's good.
Florida wasn't ranked when they played LSU.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. But still,
that's
though,
the thing though about LSU. You look at their 2 big wins. Clemson is falling apart, 1-3. Florida's falling apart. They're 1-3. So LSU hasn't beaten any good teams yet.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Not impressive.
That's gonna be the true hard test.
And honestly, Lane Kiffin may have himself the squad finally in Ole Miss. This might be the team this year in Ole Miss that we thought he was going to have last year.
Yeah.
So I'm going Rebels. I think it's going to be big. I think the Rebels are going to win by a lot here.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I am taking LSU.
All right, so we were split there on the Magnolia Bowl.
Yeah, and I'm bet the over.
Next game on the list, and I can't believe this is not the game of the week. Usually, 9 times out of 10, it is. Number 17, Alabama, traveling to number 5, Georgia. This is Bama's first trip to Athens since, I believe, 2015. And Bama beat the living soul out of Georgia that day on a rainy day down in Georgia. That was pretty much the end of Mark Richt when Bama went over to Athens and just demolished them. But for Kirby Smart, you know, for as great as he's been, right? He has more national championships than wins over Alabama. Because one of those national championships was a win over Alabama. But, he's like 1 and I believe 9 against Alabama. Like Josh Heupel has more wins against Alabama than Kirby Smart does. So that's a consolation prize for Heupel never being Kirby.
But we brought up the interesting fact that out of those 10 games, which was the only one played outside of the state of Georgia?
The national championship.
Yep.
Yeah. And last year was technically in Alabama, but but like as you said, like Georgia has not beaten Alabama in the regular season since 2007. Georgia's a slight favorite here. And of course, Bama, a lot of people haven't watched them since they got blown out on the road by Florida State.
And last year, the biggest performance by the Kellen DeBoer Alabama team was against Georgia.
Right. I'll just say this. I caution everyone against assuming Alabama is dead.
They always find a way to resurrect.
Yeah, I don't know. And Georgia, they won on the road 2 weeks ago. They should have lost. They should have lost to Tennessee. That defense has some serious questions because Tennessee ripped them up a new one like we've never seen. Like we talked about 2 weeks ago, like, oh, Heupel can't ever score on Georgia. We went there for a 41 on them. Like Joey Aguilar looked amazing in that game. And is that a function of Tennessee's offense being amazing? Or is Georgia's defense maybe not as good as they were? And if Georgia's defense is not as good as they were, then I expect Alabama to have some success in this football game.
But for me, I still think Georgia is still a solid team. I'm going with Bulldogs.
I think it's going to be another classic game. Bama, Georgia always seems to be a classic. You know what, though? Count out Alabama at your own peril. Give me the Tide.
Ooh.
I just got a feeling. I just got a feeling on this one.
Yeah, Georgia, and I'm gonna bet the over. It's gonna be a 28-25 win.
I think Bama wins 35-31. I think it'll be that type of game. All right. So the game of the week in Happy Valley, we got the Whiteout. It's a night game on NBC. Number 6 Oregon versus number 3 Penn State. This is really both teams' first big game of the year because Oregon, right? They played Oklahoma State and Oregon State, both terrible teams. Penn State has played literally nobody good. We're gonna actually learn how good these teams are this week.
Yeah, for Penn State, it's their first Big Ten, their first conference game, and especially for James Franklin, the big knock on him: can he win in the big spot? Though this is kind of one of those games,
right? And I'll be honest, I've not been impressed with Penn State. I think Oregon has looked better so far this year. I think Dante Moore is absolutely cooking a quarterback for the Ducks. I'm still not a fan of Drew Aller. Not a fan. I don't think when a push comes to shove, he is the guy that can go out and win the big game. And I know Penn State's a 3.5-point favorite, but I'm going with the Ducks to get it done here in Happy Valley.
I mean, definitely will give Oregon the status of the front runner in the Big Ten.
Yeah, with them and Ohio State.
Yeah.
Together. All right, so those are the college football games. Also, being unveiled technically tomorrow, but On Free kind of went ahead and leaked it today. We now know what the free permanent opponents are going to be for each SEC team starting next year as the conference goes to a 9-game schedule. For Tennessee, our free opponents are going to be Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky, which doesn't surprise me. Based on historic rivalries. Gus. Now, obviously.
I was going to say, so maybe I underestimated. I thought Florida was a bigger deal, but I guess that's fair. Like
I
you
mean,
can't.
Florida and Georgia are 100% bigger deals. They're just not as historic. And
Yeah, I
plus,
guess.
yeah,
I guess. I guess at this point, history counts more than hatred. Because
right.
I think Tennessee fans hate Florida and Georgia more than Kentucky.
Oh, absolutely. But for Kentucky, we're their biggest game in the SEC every single year. And so is Vanderbilt. We're their biggest game every year, but like we don't really care about Vanderbilt, except when they start getting arrogant, start talking a bit, and we got to remind them who they are. Which that's what Vanderbilt's up to this year. And I shout out to them; they scored 70 points, got revenge on Georgia State. Um, their time's coming to learn how good they actually are. But yeah, but guess what? If you look through all 16 teams, I'm not going to read through all of them. I think in general, most rivalries are sustained. LSU, Alabama, LSU, Florida aren't, which are kind of jarring to see those kind of go away on a yearly basis. Um, but otherwise, most of the big rivalries were protected.
Yeah, they can protect all, especially with this new SEC era, which there's no divisions, more teams than the past. So I guess you have to find ways to protect historical rivalries. Then kind of point out like the Southeastern Conference still has that kind of keep historical matchups alive, but at least everybody got to keep their biggest matchup, like Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Georgia.
Yeah, which by the way, with the 9 conference games, you have to wonder if the SEC should be forcing those teams to get rid of the not the neutral site aspect of those games.
Yeah, it's time to go, especially because I having a home extra game every 2 years is gonna make a difference.
Yeah, it's an unfair advantage. So hopefully they get rid of those non-con games at some point. One other piece of college sports news on the basketball side of things: Bruce Pearl announced today he's retiring from Auburn. His son Stephen Pearl is going to be elevated to be the new head coach. And to me, this timing is just really suspect. Like, why wait until 2 months before the season, and for any other reason than to make sure your program can't hire anyone else but your son? That's what it
Yeah,
feels.
and there were rumors he was gonna uh, be, try to run for political
Yes,
office.
yes, and I would be shocked if he didn't, because if you pay attention to Bruce Pearl, especially over the past couple of years, he's gotten increasingly more political, especially since the situation between Israel and Hamas started a couple of years ago. Because Bruce Pearl is Jewish, he's very pro the current Israeli government, and I think it's a big reason why he's getting involved in this potential race. Also, Tommy Tuberville, the current senator from Alabama, he is likely to run for governor next year because the current governor, Kay Ivey, can't run again. She's term limited. So, there's a chance, guys, that we could have 2 former Tennessee coaches in the U.S. Senate after next year. You have Bruce Pearl, former basketball coach, and you could have potentially Derek Dooley if he wins the Senate race in Georgia. But I think the road for Bruce Pearl is probably a lot easier than Derek Dooley because Bruce Pearl just makes it through the primary. He's going to win Alabama, while Bruce Pearl, even if you survive the Republican primary, and there's like 3 or 4 people in the Republican primary for the Senate, he's got to beat John Ossoff, the current senator for Georgia. So that's a uphill battle. So I'll be curious to see
Yeah,
if they get in.
yeah. I think for Bruce is a clear path than Julie, but yeah, Bruce Pearl, he definitely was one of the most impactful coaches in the Southeastern Conference, more so in Auburn than in Tennessee. But then he still holds the one of those more most successful runs in March. It still has that Bruce Pearl sign, you know, If I'm not mistaken, they were one game away from the Final Four.
Well, yeah, well, they were in the Final Four last year.
No. I'm saying Tennessee under Bruce Pearl.
Oh yeah. They were like right there at the end with Michigan State in the Elite Eight in 2010. So
that 2010 run. He was one game away from going to a Final Four, so he still holds that kind of also that rivalry against Memphis, being the number one team in the country. A lot of fans that we discussed before. Maybe he should have stayed, but there were a lot of allegations, right?
Yeah, with the whole barbecue thing, like Bruce Pearl should have never been fired from Tennessee. I'm sorry. I mean, it all worked out in the end, I guess, but Bruce Pearl would have eventually taken Tennessee to a Final Four, like he did with Auburn. I mean, he took Auburn to 2 Final Fours. Granted, and arguably, especially the 2019 one, they should have won against Virginia that year, and they probably would have beaten Texas Tech in the national title game, but that game got away from them. And of course, last year they just ran into a buzzsaw in Florida in the semis. So, and I remember too, like Bruce Pearl versus Tennessee, like those were some incredible games. Like the SEC tournament game last year, season game in Auburn, which was a barn burner. I mean, well, certainly we'll miss him in college basketball for sure. And if he goes on to political office, that's best to him in that arena. The last thing on the American side, Ryan Blaney won at New Hampshire. He is on to the round of 8 on that short paperclip track. They now only have 6 races remaining in the season. Can't believe we have another season that is already concluded. I actually have a question from Kai S on TikTok. He is asking if ETN for Pickens is a good trade. I would want to be on the ETN side of that. Well, actually, you know what? Yeah, because, CD Lamb's going to be out for the next month. So Pickens is now WR1 in Dallas. I definitely, if you're getting Pickens on that side of the deal, I would do it. So I love on TikTok that you get just fantasy football questions. But this week, NASCAR.
Yeah, I guess. No, I was gonna say. I guess you're becoming kind of more like a go-to TikToker for fantasy football.
Yeah, because so far I've got a team that's 3-0. I've got, I believe, 4 teams now at 2-1. So I am overall this year. I'm doing pretty well so far in fantasy football this year. Yeah, but that's all the American stuff, Gus. What's going on with the Brazilian Championship?
Yeah, Brazilian Championship had an interesting week 24. A lot of rivalry games. The most intense of them down in Rio Grande do Sul, where Grêmio beat Internacional 3-2. And Internacional missed a penalty on the last play of the game. And then, of course, the coach got fired. Roger Machado was under a lot of heat because of the Brazilian Cup and Libertadores eliminations. So losing a rivalry game at home just definitely sealed his deal. He's out as International head coach. Palmeiras big win on Saturday 4-1 to keep close to Flamengo. 2 points behind, but they have one less game than Flamengo. Flamengo tie 1-1 against Vasco in a rivalry game, but they play with half of the team with the reserves because they have a huge game against Estudiantes in Libertadores. Cruzeiro, big win, also 2-1 against Red Bull Bragantino, with the winning on the last play of the game as well. So pretty much the racing title is going to be Flamengo, Cruzeiro, and Palmeiras. And that's going to be the 3 teams that are going to fight to the title. But how about Mirassol? Still 4th place. They got a win over Juventude, and that is still mind-boggling to me. That small city team, Mirassol, is the 4th best team in Brazil. right now, it's still crazy to me. Corinthians lost on the road to Sport, the last place team. They that finally got their first home win of the Brazilian Championship. That's crazy. After 11 games, they finally got a win at home. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting Brazilian Championship, especially the title race going to be Flamengo, Cruzeiro, and Palmeiras. And on Thursday, going to talk more about what happens in this midweek second leg games in Libertadores and Sul-Americana as well.
Absolutely. In episode 200, we're talking more about that, talk some NFL, and kind of reflect on nearly 4 years of the Two Countries, Two Americas All Sports podcast. Absolutely. But in any case, this is it for episode 199. For Gus, I am Nick. Thank you so much for watching the only American and Brazilian sports podcast.